Okay. AMD's 5800X 3D has been out in the wild for a while now, and we've seen reviews from pretty much all the big tech channels at this point. But as cool and informative as those initial day one reviews are, they can't predict the future. Things change, technology changes, and this is just a dumb way to explain that this review is not late, everyone else's reviews were just early. And that's because in this review, we won't just be taking a look at the 5800X 3D as it stands right now, although we're obviously going to do that too. Now, we're also going to dig into a brand new feature that certain motherboard makers have been rolling out recently that pushes past AMD's limits and could make the 5800X 3D even more interesting than it already is. Almost as interesting as today's video sponsor Crucial and their top-of-the-range supercharged P5 Plus NVMe SSDs. The P5 Plus range features best-in-class NAND flash and controller parts sourced directly from Micron, enabling ultra-fast read speeds of 6600 megabytes per second and up to 5000 megabytes per second write speeds. Speeds I confirmed and blew past in my own review of the P5 Plus, which you can find linked in the video description. The P5 Plus can be had in 500 gig, 1TB, and 2TB capacities, all of which feature a host of reliability and security features, and as I confirmed in my own tutorial video, they even work great for upgrading your PS5 storage, especially now that some of them ship with their own little heatsinks. They're also very competitively priced, so go ahead and get yours now via the link in the description, and if you're in South Africa, grab them at Takealot, also linked down below. Now, for those who need a little refresher, AMD's Ryzen 7 5800X 3D brings with it almost everything that makes the regular 5800X great. We've got 8 cores, 16 threads, a big IPC boost, 105 watt TDPs, and all of the other tasty Zen 3 improvements and features. Oh, and it also lands at the same launch price of $450. Curiously, what we don't have is the same raw clock speed, or the ability to overclock, but we'll get to that later. The regular 5800X starts at a base clock of 3.8 GHz and boosts all the way up to 4.7 GHz, while the 5800X 3D starts at 3.4 with the max boost of just 4.5 GHz. But even with those lower clocks, AMD claims that the 5800X 3D is up to 15% faster than Intel's beastly Core i9-12900K in certain games. So what gives? Well, 3D V-Cache gives, and it apparently gives a lot. In massively oversimplified terms, 3D V-Cache is a technology that lets AMD stack multiple chiplets on top of each other and has them all working together as a team, and that's a thing that totally works because science. In the case of the 5800X 3D, we've got a tasty sandwich made up of L3 cache, 96 megabytes of L3 cache to be precise, which is 64 more megabytes of cache than on the regular 5800X. This extra cache should be good for games because reading game data from cache memory is a lot quicker than reading it from RAM. So, the more data we have in cache, the less time the processor needs to fetch said data, which translates into more performance and higher frames per second. Or at least that's what AMD wants us to think. There's no way to know for sure until we see this thing in action, so let's get to it. The system we'll be using to do just that includes MSI's X570A's motherboard, 32 gigs of Crucial's Ballistics RGB RAM running at 3600 MHz CL16, MSI's RTX 3070 Gaming X Trio, Crucial's P5 Plus as our main storage, MSI's Core Liquid 360R keeping the chip cool, and Antec's EAG Pro 750W to deliver all of the power. Now, before we see what that sexy new motherboard feature I mentioned earlier is all about, we should first put the chip to the test the way the PC gods and AMD intended. That being without any hacky features turned on. And let's kick things off with productivity benchmarks, starting as always with a couple of Cinebench drag races. And here's the part where I should probably explain that the 5800X 3D's cache advantage is only really an advantage in applications like games that can make good use of it. Applications that don't benefit much from it will benefit much more from higher clock speeds, which is why we also see the 5800X fall slightly behind in our Blender benchmarks. Putrid Bench's Photoshop benchmark bucks the trend a little, with the 5800X 3D coming out on top, but then it loses ground again in the Premiere Pro benchmark. But in either case, the score for both 5800X versions are so close that you probably won't notice any practical difference. Jumping into our gaming benchmarks, I really expected to see the X3D absolutely dominating here, but that didn't quite work out at first. In Unigen superposition, it scored higher than its non-3D counterpart, but fell short compared to Intel's 11700KF. It also lagged slightly behind the regular 5800X in 3D Mark Time Spy, and well behind the Intel competition. In Civilization 6 and Cyberpunk, the 11700KF came out on top again, and the regular 5800X narrowly beat out the X3D. But things started to turn around for the 5800X3D, and not just because I don't have numbers for the 11700KF for the rest of the games. In every other game I tested, the 5800X3D completely turned things around and came out on top every time. Of course, in games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Borderlands 3, and Horizon Zero Dawn, the 5800X3D's lead over the non-3D version was fairly negligible. That being said, in other games like Hitman 3, Metro Exodus, God of War, and Forza Horizon 5, that lead stretches out well beyond what you'd consider margin of error territory. But this is still not really the performance bump I'd been expecting to see. Luckily, the bump I expected to see actually popped up in our final 3 benchmarks. In The Witcher 3, the 5800X3D managed to come out on top of the 5800X with a much more impressive 10% lead. That's more like it. Oh, and did I say impressive? No. Our average FPS numbers in Far Cry 6 and Far Cry New Dawn are impressive. Almost suspiciously so, but I tested and retested and tested some more, and I kept getting the same results. The 5800X3D absolutely dominated the 5800X with a huge 17% uplift in Far Cry 6 and an even huger uplift in Far Cry New Dawn. That's pretty nutty. Clearly, some games don't care all that much about L3 cache, or at least just not enough to offset the 5800X3D's lower clocks. But in other games, better designed to make full use of it, it can be an absolute game changer. What all this shows is that the 5800X3D is an absolutely worthy successor to the 5800X, especially if you're playing titles optimized for the X3D's extra cache, like Far Cry, The Witcher, and probably a bunch of others I wasn't able to test. Hopefully, we'll see even more developers optimizing for higher cache CPUs in the coming years. But hey, this isn't the end for the 5800X3D story. I promised that we'd take a look at a new motherboard feature, and now seems as good a time as any. The feature in question is called Kombo Strike, and it's only found on certain MSI motherboards after updating to the latest beta BIOS. The feature supposedly dances around AMD's no overclocking rule for the X3D by doing something. MSI hasn't really gone through the trouble of explaining how the feature works other than saying it's used for gaining extra performance, but luckily the numbers I got during testing paint a fuller picture. As this graph comparing all 3 levels of Kombo Strike shows, the feature almost definitely undervolts the CPU, and in all 3 cases plays around with the clock speeds a little too. Both levels 1 and 2 show higher all-core max clock speeds, accompanied, weirdly since they're using less power, by higher temps. Level 3 sees an even bigger jump to max all-core clock speed, while also drawing significantly less power and running substantially cooler. So great news for anyone worried about temps and power draw. But what about performance? Well, here's where things get a little boring. So boring that I'm not going to waste your time with another mountain of charts. The TLDR is that gaming performance using Kombo Strike 3 was in most cases about in line with the performance we saw with Combo turned off. There were 1 or 2 outliers where Combo 3 added or subtracted 1 or 2 FPS, but other than that, you're looking at like less than a 1% difference overall. Oh, and definitely don't use either Combo 1 or 2 since both of those resulted in notable performance drops in my case. All of that sort of makes sense considering Kombo Strike seems to be targeting higher all-core performance rather than single-core performance, which is where we saw no difference regardless of the level used. The higher all-core performance did count for something though, as in all-core heavy workloads like Cinebench, Blender, and Premiere Pro, we did see a nice little uplift across the board. And even though it is a little disappointing that Kombo Strike didn't boost gaming performance in my case, the uplift in production workloads, and more importantly, the lower power draw and temps that come with Combo 3, I think makes it a legitimately cool feature to have. Whether it's worth upgrading to a beta BIOS to unlock it, well, that's up to you. Okay, so we've seen what AMD's best gaming CPU ever can really do, but is it actually worth your time and hard-earned cash? Well, the short answer after taking everything into account is not really. Even though the 5800X3D is a phenomenal chip for gaming, uses less power, and runs cooler than the 5800X, even more so with the help of MSI's Kombo Strike, which also boosts productivity benchmarks, it's very pricey and stuck on a platform that's destined to be replaced very soon. At its current price of $440 or 8,300 Rand here in South Africa, it's $140 more expensive than the 5800X and about $50 more than the 5900X, which is kind of insane. I mean, yes, the X3D is the better gaming chip overall, but unless you're looking at a small handful of games where we saw some legitimately mind-blowing improvements, the difference as a whole is unfortunately not all that impressive. Or certainly not impressive enough to justify that price. The only way that pricing makes sense is if you're looking at the most direct competition from Team Blue. Compared to the 12900K, which trades blows with the X3D in some benchmarks, and the 12900KS, which comes out slightly on top, the X3D seems like a friggin' deal. And that's fair enough. AMD's fastest gaming CPU is massively cheaper than Intel's and nets you a very similar gaming experience. But just because the pricing for one thing is stupid doesn't mean the pricing for another thing isn't also stupid. Both are stupid. Unless you don't care about value at all and just want the absolute best of the best, there are way cheaper options for both teams that will get you like 90 to 95% of the way there. And even if wanting the best of the best regardless of price is exactly what you're into, it's probably a good idea to hold off for a while anyway. The AM4 platform that we know and love is officially dead. The 5800X3D is sort of the last big hurrah for AM4, which should be replaced within the next couple of months by AM4 and the new Ryzen 7000 series. Obviously, none of this means that the 5800X3D is a bad chip. It's not. It's great. And for people who already have AM4 boards and something like the Ryzen 3600 or older, it's a massive upgrade that doesn't come with the cost of a brand new platform and one that won't see you like having to shell out for expensive DDR5 memory. But if you already have something like the Ryzen 5600 or better, or an equivalent setup from Team Blue, then it just doesn't make sense to buy right now. And if you're planning on putting together a brand new system, maybe just wait a month or two until we see how the launch of Ryzen's next gen goes down. And that's all, folks. Let me know in the comments what you think about the 5800X3D and whether you'd upgrade to it with next gen knocking on the door. Big thanks to AMD for letting me play around with the 5800X3D, and remember to check out Crucial's P5 Plus SSD if you're finally ready to speed up your PC life and need more storage for your PS5. Oh, and remember to grab all of the things that take a lot, also linked down below if you're a fellow South African. And yeah, hope to see you all in the next one. Cheers!